watched and I asked the Lord, I said, Lord, help me to really grasp what's happening, what you're doing, where we're going. And I watched all of you, you do what you did, the singers, the musicians, ushers, and Brother Wallace praying, and I just looked at all of it, and I see the Lord is maturing. He's developing you for something much bigger, much better, much different than what you know. And I know sometimes it's tempting to stay in the place that seems to be more comfortable because of what everybody else is doing. But I see him doing something in us that is powerfully, radically different than what we have seen before. And I realized that we had set a very high standard. And lots of times you all depended on me to do things, and you wouldn't necessarily move except I gave you the cue or whatever. And I watched you all just flow with freedom. I see the Holy Spirit doing something that I don't believe will be taken away from you. I believe you're getting to a place that the Lord really wants you to be, because I realize that our jobs, they're to train, to develop. And you're not to be reluctant to let the Holy Spirit use you. And I think we've established enough order that you know how to do what you do in order. Because I know you've been in church a long time and you've seen folk that said the Lord was using them, and they take up half of the worship service doing stuff, dancing and shouting and hollering, yes, Lord, yes, Lord, yes, Lord, yes, Lord. And they never told you what they said yes to. You never figured it out. And I just believe that there's a maturity that has to come. There's a growth that has to come. I was reading some information. Dr. Paul Youngie Cho, when he got ready to start his church, God sent him to a village, and he said it was just hard. He couldn't make anything happen. And said the witch doctors that were in the village came to him and told him, said, you need to leave. And if you don't leave, we will make your life miserable, literally to the point of death. And what happened, there was a lady and her child had been sick for years, bedridden. And they challenged him. They said, listen, if you can heal this woman and raise her up, then we will believe that your God is true. And they said, we give you 30 days. Now, they had already tried. They couldn't raise her up. But they said, if your God is real, then you raise her up. And if you can't, then you leave and don't ever come back. And he said he would go and pray for her every morning. Nothing happened. And he thought, Lord, he said, what is this spirit that I'm dealing with? And see, these people did not want to hear anything about the living God. He only had a handful of folk. And sometime just before the 30-day period, he had a dream or vision, and this spirit came in his room and said it was the scariest thing he'd ever seen. And he didn't realize that this spirit was the spirit that was ruling that village. And said in this dream, it wrapped its arms and its tentacles around him and started to squeeze the life out of him. And said he didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to deal with it. And said in his mind, all he could do was think the name Jesus. And said when he did, this thing started to loosen its grip. And he finally got it out with just a whisper. And it backed up even more. And then he finally got to the place that he could say the name Jesus out loud. And this thing loosed him and let him go, because this thing told him before it started choked the life out of him, said, I am the God of this region, and we don't want you here, and you will have no victory here. And said, I've come to take you out. And he said the next morning, he looked up, and there were just gobs of people coming towards the place he was staying. And he thought, oh my God, I am in trouble. The woman has died, and I know I'm going to have to leave. And said when they got closer, he saw that the woman that was supposed to have died, it was her and her son leading all the people. And that was in Korea. And they came to where he was, and this lady told him, said, I thank you for healing me, said, because you came to me last night, and you prayed over me, and I was healed. And young Cho was thinking to himself, no, I was in here about to die myself. I couldn't have been where you were. But you see, the angel of the Lord showed himself looking like Dr. Cho and healed this woman and her baby. That spirit left. That whole area was converted to the faith of Jesus Christ. And one brother said he went to preach at Youngie Cho's church at 7 in the morning, and there were 10,000 people. And he said, man, you have a huge congregation. He said, no, these are just my deacons. He said, all the people aren't here. These are just my deacons. He generated, because of him letting the Holy Spirit lead, generated in that church so many successful people. About 10, 12 years ago, he bought a 747, had it renovated just so he could take 250 or so of those who had come out of poverty and were millionaires to Europe just for a tour to see how to better develop that region of the country. Now, I guess my problem is, folks, I read stuff and I see what's been done in other places. And I see how people followed the pattern. And I see us struggling with things, and it's really frustrating. It really is. Because I'm saying we don't have to be in this shape. We don't have to. But these people got themselves together. They had a way of thinking that said, we're going to work together. We're going to do what we ought. We're going to act the way we ought. And we're going to see the glory of our God manifest. And I may be going after a pipe dream. It may not ever happen. But when I watched our children sing, I said, Lord, help them to understand that the unity they have in their voices, let them have it in their spirits. Let them have it in their minds so they know how to work together to bring change. Now, I realize that everybody is not going to get this thing right, but I believe that there is a remnant that's looking for what this thing truly is. And you know, when this thing happened with my wife last Thursday, and I thought it was interesting, it happened on the day of Passover, the 14th day of April. And Passover had been the 14th day since God brought the children of Israel out of Egypt, because he told them, on the 14th day of the month shall be your Passover. And they kept the Passover the same date every year, no matter what day it fell on. So they kept it the same date. Now we're going to talk about Pentecost. And then Pentecost was 50 days later. And when I started studying this thing about Pentecost, I realized that they would bring their first fruit on the day of Pentecost into the temple. What was that all about? Well, they would start planting their crops in February, March, the first set of crops, and the first fruit would come off the 1st of June. And that was called the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of Harvest, all of that, because that was the first time that they got some crops in. So that was Pentecost. And you know, we make a lot of noise about the Passover and literally say nothing about the Pentecost. Because the Pentecost was actually where the blessings began to manifest from what was done at Passover. And the law was given to Israel. Moses went up into the mountain and got the law in the month of Sivan, which would be our June. He went up the first 4 days of June and he got the law. So they celebrated Pentecost at the time they got the law. And why did they do that? They said, because now we have something to govern us, because Egypt had messed up our thinking so bad, we've got something to govern us now, so now we can have freedom from this old system. You see, if you don't have something to govern you, you'll keep messing around the old stuff. And you'll never get yourself out of it because you'll think that that's the only way to go, because you don't know anything different. So they had come out of Egypt, and all they knew was Egyptian bondage. But on the day of Pentecost, it was the law that was given, and they said, now we have something to govern us. This is where our freedom begins. The Bible said, a child left to himself bringeth his mother shame. If there's no discipline, no order, there's not going to be any structure. If there's no structure, you're not going to have the things come into your life that you absolutely need for your life's furtherance. You can't get there. So when they got that law, they said, now we have something that can set us in motion, and this is where we celebrate our Pentecost, and they brought their first fruit. In other words, they got their first little bit of harvest the first 3 days of June. Now, if we do Pentecost, what we call Easter was done this year in what? On the 27th or 16th of March? Well, it can't come out to be 50 days later if we do it then. So I'm just talking about what I found in the book, okay? I am not disturbed with when you have any of your holidays. I just saw stuff in the Bible, and in Hebrews chapter 8, he told Moses, said, build this thing according to the pattern. Then he said over in 2 Corinthians, he said, for the things that are unseen are the real things. The things that are temporal, they're not real. So, if I'm doing stuff that's temporal, I'm doing stuff that's not real. Now, if I'm going to do it according to the pattern, you see, they celebrate Passover the same date every year in heaven. They don't move it based on the moon. The moon is a servant. They don't use the moon to tell them when to do anything. They do what they do based on the date God said, because down here is when the blessings come. And I saw all this stuff. I said, Lord, have mercy. I said, look at what is actually taking place here. Let me show you something. We're going to come back down to Acts chapter 2, but let me show you something in Exodus 34 real quick. Exodus chapter 34. Look at verse 23. Now, he's talking about these feasts. But in verse 23, he said, thrice in the year shall all your men children appear before the Lord God, the God of Israel. For I will cast out the nations before thee, and enlarge thy borders. Neither shall any man desire thy land when thou shalt go up to appear before the Lord thy God thrice in the year. He said, now, 3 times a year, I want all the males to come up to Jerusalem to worship me. And they all had to come with a gift. And this was talking about, one of the times they came up was Passover and Pentecost. That was really one feast. So when they came up, he said, when you do that, he said, I'm going to enlarge your borders. In other words, I'm going to increase you when you celebrate this time. I'm going to cause blessings to come because you brought me your first fruit and you did it according to the pattern from heaven. He said, now, if I put stuff in motion and heaven rains down certain things on June 1, 2, and 3, and if you're not celebrating that, when it rains down, it won't rain on you. put certain things in motion. You see, that's a law, folk. Do you understand that the law of Pentecost, that is something, it's a law, just like the law of gravity. Get on the building, jump, you will fall to the ground because you're not a bird. You see, there are things that work no matter what. This law of Pentecost works. But see, we do it at the wrong time. So things are not falling on us the way they're supposed to. He said, I will enlarge your border. In other words, I'm going to stretch you out. I'm going to give you more because you're following a pattern. And that pattern that I've set will get you the same reward every time you do it, and it'll increase. But if you don't follow the pattern, things that you need to happen will not happen. So you'll be struggling with a lesser God trying to give you something that it can't give you. He said, I'll enlarge your borders, neither shall any man desire thy land. He said, you know what? Whatever you got, nobody will take it from you. Nobody will take your stuff if you're following my pattern. But if you're doing what you want to do, then you got to protect it. When you do what I say do, I protect it. See? So that's the difference. So as I started to see this, I said, now, Lord, I've got to get back on track. He said, neither shall any man desire thy land when thou shalt go up to appear before the Lord thy God 3 times in the year. He said, when you're gone, nobody's going to come in and try to steal your land. In other words, the blessings, whatever he's given you, he'll make you keep it. In other words, when the enemy comes in like a flood, he will lift the standard up. And certain things won't be able to stop you. Certain things won't hinder you because you're following a pattern. Now, I think all of you, and like I said, I'm not bothering your holiday. I'm trying to give you truth because I'm trying to figure out why certain things don't work. I'm trying to figure out why I don't have these blessings like I'm supposed to have. Now, when this thing happened to my wife on the 14th day of April, which was Passover, and then by the 15th day, this whole side is in paralysis. Hand and leg will not work. By the 15th day, she's walking 24 hours later, and 90% use of this hand is back. Doctors say we did the EKG, and we don't find any brain damage. None whatsoever. So now, the enemy would try to make me think, oh, you shouldn't have bothered this Passover thing. No, I should have bothered the Passover thing because he said no man can steal anything from you. So he couldn't take anything from her because we were in a time frame that was set up according to a heavenly pattern. So now, I'm not telling you that, to stop doing but your Easter bunny and all that. You do that if you feel that. But I'm looking for the pattern because I got to have something else. There's got to be something else. This thing is not working. And for me to keep coming to church every year and we keep doing the same things, operating the same way, and I get no results, that is insanity. I am coming out of the insane asylum. I'm leaving Cherry Hospital. You're supposed to have more money than you have. You're not supposed to be as sick as you are. You're supposed to be out from under a whole lot of stuff. But there's certain patterns I believe that we have left. And I know it's unpopular because we live in America. But I want to be just an American. I really do. I want to be just an American. But the system won't let me. They make me a black American. Everybody else can come and be an American in just a couple of years. I've been here, and please, I ain't trying to be racial. I'm just telling you what it is. I'm just trying to be American, but I got to be a hyphenated American. I just can't be a whole one. And why can't everybody else be a whole one? I mean, they put other folk up on the civil rights bill with me. And they can be LGBT and be an American. I started a civil rights bill. I got to be a half one. I'm just talking basic understanding. I just think about stuff, you know. And I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I'm just trying to figure some things out. Because I'm saying, this book, why is not it working? I don't see the things you said. And he said, Moses, if you do it according to the pattern, I'll bless. He said, for the things that are seen are not the real things. The things that are unseen. So when I look at the unseen, I got to quit looking at the earth and I got to look at what's coming from the heavens. The heavens do not change. God the Father has not changed anything. He said, I'm the same yesterday, today, and forever. So now, if he does not change whatever the pattern is, and he told Moses, when you build that ark and that temple, make sure you do it according to the pattern, because I want a replica in earth of what's in heaven. So now, if I'm seated with Christ in heavenly places, I'm not seated with Christ with all this junk that's going on with me. I am in a different position. Now, my condition on earth, I've got to fight some things. But if I start to appropriate according to the pattern, I think some things should start to change in me. And I'm not trying to be super spiritual. I just have read stuff in the book, and I can't figure it out. Why are we doing this when you said do this? That's all. I'm not trying to hurt anybody's belief system. I'm not telling you what to believe or what to disbelieve. I'm just saying that I've been in this thing and I've not seen the kind of results that this book says we're supposed to have. And we may say, well, you know, there were people 50, 100 years ago, they got blessings and this, that, the other, and got healed and all that. And yeah, I know that. But I know that God is a gracious and merciful God, and what he has done, I believe, is that he has been patient, and he winked at certain things back here. And he didn't make a big fuss. But then we come to a place in the time where we get closer to the end of time where he's expecting correction of things. That's what I believe. He's expecting correction. And I believe that it's time where, this is the time where we need to get into another place of understanding. Now, what is Pentecost? Well, first of all, Pentecost is, it means 50. And at Pentecost, it means liberty, freedom, jubilee, deliverance. So, if we did Passover right, and we give you the right instruction leading up to, then you should have some things happen the 1st of June, because it's Pentecost, and Pentecost represents the Jubilee. And after 7 weeks, they call it the Feast of Weeks because he told them, you go 7 weeks, and then on the 50th day, 7 weeks is 49 days, on the 50th day, you have a celebration, a one-day celebration of Pentecost. To where you bring me an offering of your first fruit. He said, because what I'm going to do, and see, when he let them have that first fruit of the harvest, that was an indicator of what he'll do for you every year. And he did that for them every year, and they had a first fruit harvest, and they brought it to him, then he caused them to increase for the rest of the year. They didn't have, if they had only $10 when they had that first fruit brought in, by the time they got to the end of the year, they'd have 100. And he kept increasing them. So I'm looking at patterns here, and I'm saying, Lord, there's something wrong with what we do, because we're doing what we do, and we tend to continue to struggle. He said, son, angels follow the patterns that I have set. He said, they operate by the patterns. He said, now what happened when a group of angels quit operating by the pattern? They fell. And they can't ever come back into heaven because they moved away from what I said. He said, now through grace and mercy, you all do get to heaven, but you don't get much heaven on earth. And he said, that's where you're struggling. You get to heaven because I give you grace and mercy, but because you don't follow my patterns, you don't get much of what I say on the earth. And you're constantly having to ask for prayer just to get through stuff that you ought not even be in. You ought not be in certain things. You need to be on beyond that. Why are you still in that same thing 20 years later? If Pentecost, if you follow Passover, and 50 days later here is Pentecost, shouldn't you have increased? And he said, what did he say? He said, I will enlarge your borders and nobody will take your stuff. That's right. So why do you have repossessions? Why your stuff falling apart? Why you can't seem to get to the next place? I believe it's because we have set our own patterns, or Satan has set some for us. And if Satan sets the road you're on, he's certainly going to lead you away from your prosperity. He's going to lead you away from your health. He's going to lead you away from what is good for you. And I'm just looking for how to get there. And like I said, I have to keep saying it because people that may tune in when they hear messages I do, and they tune in the middle, they start, oh, well, he's this, he's that. I have to keep saying I am not trying to hurt anybody. I'm just looking for what this book says. And see, I can't be deluded by just a handful of folk at the top being successful. Do you know that there are 62 people, most of them in America, in this world that owns more wealth than 2.5 billion people on the planet? 62 owns more wealth, most of them are Americans, than 2.5 billion. Exactly half of the world's population, 62 people owns more wealth than, we got what, 7 billion people? So that would be about 3.5, than 3.5 billion people.